Jeff Miller, coach extraordinaire in my books. One of my most profound coachee experiences was with you when you were assigned to me to coach me, and my skepticism and nausea turned into beautiful fragrance and give me more. It was beautiful.
Well, I appreciate that. Normally it's the opposite. Your beautiful fragrance turns into skepticism and something else. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for being in the CTO studio with me. I'm very excited to chat with you about our topic today. And so you're a tennis player turned ontological coach. You are a PCC coach, which means the International Coaching Federation has certified you as a profession. What does PCC stand for?
Professional and certified coach. Yeah, it's the second highest distinction in the coaching field.
The highest being MCC, right?
Master certified coach. Yeah.
And are you going for that?
I will be going for that and I'll probably obtain that next year. So
Okay.
2022. Yeah.
So next year, this conversation would have been far richer than it's going to be now.
Maybe if you judge by the initials next to my name, but quality not so sure.
Yeah, I met Jeff. I'm in a program called Accomplishment Coaching, learning how to be an ontological coach. I am marching towards graduation, but I fell short of certifying as an ACC, which you have to score 7+, and I scored 5+, which to me was a miracle because I have so much consulting and advice inside of me, and learning how to just be with people is still having to unlearn decades of giving people advice.
Yeah, and I can relate to that with my background as well. So I think everyone's path is great and where they're at, and I've definitely seen you come a long way with what you can be with, and just different muscles. So kudos to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So I think as representing CTOs in this conversation, one of the challenges we have, and maybe that's because of the environment we the environment that promoted us to this position, which is rapidly solving problems, not being with problems but eradicating them, and doing that as quickly as possible, and in many cases having just this incessant urgency to resolve matters, whether it's with your development teams or your middle management layer or in the C-suite, just allaying fears or concerns. And so I think that we've been rewarded over the years and decades, for being quick to solve problems, and and it's ironic for me that at this point, as leaders, as evangelists, as visionaries, that we have to unlearn that stuff. And I think the word that to me starts the unraveling and pulling at the thread is this word curiosity. And that's what you and I are going to jam on today. And so I'm really happy and thankful that you're with me to do this exploration together.
Likewise, likewise. I think engineers and CTOs of all kinds, it's an amazing skill that all these folks have. And like you said, problem solving, thinking critically in a fast way, and fixing a lot of problems, right? And I use air quotes because they're not always problems, but it does solve issues quickly. And so some of my favorite clients are engineers and CTOs for that matter, because that's not how I think, and that's not my world. So it's a good yin to their yang.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. So you are actively coaching executives, and some of those executives include CTOs. What's it like coaching CTOs?
Um, very, very high intellect, as you can imagine. And I like to use simplistic language and humor to combat the intellect. Because at the end of the day, humans are really similar. And I think not just CTOs, but successful executives kind of have been brainwashed to separate themselves from others. And while that's good in some situations, right, differentiating, offering personal value, but also normalizing, right? CTOs need to relate to a lot of people. They need to relate to everyone in the organization. They need to relate to people out in the world. Like you said, they're evangelizing what they're doing out in the world, both themselves and their company. Well, they can't do it if they're speaking over people or at people. So for me, I bring a little bit of humanitism into it, right? And I think that coming from tennis and the sports background, for whatever reason, they like that. Maybe the analytics of tennis, maybe the chess version of tennis, right? So it's fun for me. Like it's a big A game type of conversation, and I notice the more I can just be me, the more it allows them to be themselves.
Mm, I love that. And do you find that skepticism, or I guess people who sign up to get coached are already open to being coached and coachable? Have you had situations where the CEO says, "I really want you to coach my CTO," and so then the CTO gets signed up under duress, or is that just a non-starter?
I like that. I just got a picture of like someone in handcuffs, like coming to a Zoom call. I mean, like I was told I have to be here. The irony of that. So my neighbor, who I actually coached in tennis when I transitioned, we kind of played, phone tag, which is hilarious because we're neighbors. But all things in COVID, right? We were kind of giving each other space. We connected probably a year after I left tennis, and we had lunch. And this guy is very skeptical of coaching, and he would hire a consultant, not a coach. And he runs a high level IT firm out here in Southern California and wanted me to work with his CTO and a couple of his VP guys. And he was not a fan of coaching. He didn't understand coaching, but he was like, I like you. I'll give it a try. Fast forward, I've been working with them a couple of years. This guy calls me for coaching advice, and his company has probably been 30-40% increase in revenue,
Mm,
company morale, by the way, through COVID, and have had like a breakthrough in how they run their business. So I would say, yeah, sure, it'd be great if everyone came to me with no skepticism and was all in. A lot of times they need something, they don't know what they need, and they just are pointed to my direction. And then probably take something 2 to 3 months to really understand what the heck this coaching thing is.
mm.
And then a light bulb goes off,
Yeah,
and then they start actually doing the work and trusting. It takes a little time. So I think the higher intellect and the more successful, actually the more skepticism, and
yeah.
the tighter the circle. So to penetrate that circle, it takes a little bit of time, and it takes consistency for me showing up the same way regardless of how they show up.
I love that. Yeah, I wonder if the intellect or the logical deduction or the deconstruction uh, makes us constantly plot the different outcomes of where the conversation's going, and then we run to the back of those outcomes and we start working our way back to destroy the opposition. It's I can see it when my wife sees me doing that, and she can see right through me now. She can say, I can see what you're doing, and it's yeah. So I want to dive into this concept of curiosity, Jeff. Can you just for us, just like how do you define it? How do you see it? What is it? How does it show up? Just give me some background on it, or whatever what comes to mind for you on that.
The ironic thing is, whenever I hear the word curiosity, I always finish a sentence with "killed the cat."
Yes.
But aside from that, I think curiosity is the invitation to play, and that's where I think the conflict begins. And I work with an executive at Amazon, and literally, like, part of who she is play, but she doesn't allow it because she's quote unquote not supposed to. So there's this duality with curiosity. Curiosity is the ability to make mistakes, to learn, to grow, to be open, and to have fun, um, without necessarily having the answer or fixing a problem. So when I look at engineers or CTOs or executives, it kind of goes against the grain sometimes of how they're programmed. Um, so I think it starts with the permission to allow all of us to be curious and not have that look a certain way. So I actually
Mm.
define curiosity as something that's really undefinable in the sense of how it looks for you, for me, for our kids, right? That's a great way to look at your kids. When was the last time we were curious about, I don't know, peanut butter like they were, right? Like, when was the last time we were curious about our relationships, our work, like how we actually do things, the world, like a
Mm.
kid looks at peanut butter?
And that's very interesting for me because that to me says take the invitation to play concept means like a child question or investigate why things are the way they are, because the colloquial curiosity, I think every technical person has the colloquial curiosity, which is this strong desire to learn new languages, new problems to solve. So I think what excites me about what you said is it just sort of untangles this thing from no, curiosity is not you solving problems or being curious on how to solve things. I'm curious, I'm curious. Why are no, it's that invitation to not lean on your stodgy stereotypes or your ways, and to say, wow, I want to challenge that. I want to lean into that. So that makes me very excited. If I'm saying it right.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, yeah, bringing curiosity to how you're going to solve the next problem is rather limiting. Like, sure, that still can like be helpful, but I would be more curious of what has us have to solve that problem,
Mm.
right? So, are we having what I call macro curiosity, like why did I wear this shirt? Why did you wear that? Like, why do I feel a certain way? Why am I excited about this project? Because I agree with you. Like, I would imagine every CTO at one point was a boy deconstructing a computer, or
Or a girl,
or,
or a girl.
or a girl, yes, a boy, girl, or anything else these days, right? But anybody, right? Like anybody in their youth, right? Deconstructing a control car, a helicopter, a computer. We didn't do that because we thought we should. We did that because we were curious. And we took that whole process of deconstructing that and just getting really clear and having fun and playing around with it. So if we took that model, if we took that healthy, I would call it like an optimistic curiosity to all these things, what other things might open up that maybe we're
Mm.
overlooking because we're in problem solving mode?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to completely meta mode and wondering if my desire to code was born from curiosity. Maybe curiosity got me into it, but then the subsequent programming and the solving and the playing and the games and the learning how to code, I wonder if curiosity sort of spiked in the beginning and then just kind of, because here's the thing that I notice in people if not CTO types, is and really in people, it's the we don't like change and we rush to the familiar. And you see this a lot in the way we solve problems. Oftentimes we will solve new problems with old ways of doing things because that's what we know how to do. And I would say even though you're ostensibly solving a problem there, you're not there's no curiosity involved in that.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I don't think people like being uncomfortable and like, stretching themselves and what their normal bandwidth is. And I don't want to say there's anything wrong with that because there isn't, but it is limiting, right? Like we're not going to Mars with that thinking, right? We're not doing massive things. We're not solving world hunger with that thinking, right? That's not going to get the job done. And we're not creating all these amazing, innovative things without inviting curiosity, at least a seat at the table. And I think, like you said, curiosity probably got us into everything we're doing. But at one point, we realized curiosity wasn't efficient
Mm.
and it was
Mm.
getting in the way of immediate results.
That is very, very insightful because it does, it's this constant struggle between delivery and predictability and measurability, whereas curiosity lives in this innovation. We don't know what we're going to give you in 3 weeks. It could be everything, it could be nothing.
Yeah, somewhere someone has created a spreadsheet template for curiosity.
So, do you have a theory or a feeling on how we as adults lose that? So, if children are naturally curious, and uh, I saw an interview recently with Giannis, the NBA MVP,
Hmm.
and he said he practiced with Kobe Bryant once, and he asked Kobe Bryant for advice, and Kobe said, "Be like a child, play, play like a child, or something." And Giannis was confused, and Kobe basically said, "Be curious, just constantly be curious as to what's going on around you. Don't ever settle for what you know." And so I'm just thinking, how is it that we lose that?
Yeah, I mean, all we have to do is look at how either we, relate to our own kids or how our parents relate to us. At a certain point, we lost the permission to be curious and we became practical, right? Like at some point, like our stuffed animals had to have a name, they had to have a gender, they had to like wear things. We had to get up and brush our teeth and have structure and stop being silly, right? And again, when you look at society as a whole, like there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely a time and place for certain things, but the way we're told it has to be this way, we basically conform. And I actually think a lot of CTOs, and I would probably say yourself, is a response to not conforming, right? Like you're all about innovation, you're all about empowering others. That's what this is all about, right? We're empowering CTOs at this point in time and people, right? Well, that is not conforming, right? Conforming is just staying in your lane, doing your thing. So it's a constant rebound effect of like conform, unconform, conform, unconform. And I think to answer your question, and like I love the Kobe Bryant and Giannis conversation because we should question everything. The minute we stop questioning things, curiosity goes out the window. We become robots. And I think it's healthy, whether we're talking about spirituality, relationships, politics, just our routines, right? Health. It's just going to help support you being that more sure about your process. I think people don't question the system or process enough. And to your point, they look at what's wrong and what needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and what I find to be the subtlety there is the you can come to a problem or a person or an organizational deficiency and want to solve it for the right reasons. And yes, that's why you're a highly paid executive and you solve problems. But you can also come to it with like you said, a curiosity, and and I'm reflecting on sort of a nauseating phrase that technical people or technical leaders like to throw out is like, well, what problem are you really trying to solve? And to me, that is not the beginning of curiosity. That to me is the beginning of adversity or screw this, I don't have time for this shit. So I want to dig a little bit into that subtlety of how it shows up in the workplace because it can have the appearance of curiosity, but really it's everything but.
Yeah, it's coming from that fixie place, which is like forcing curiosity so as to fix something. And I love what you said. It's like, what problem are you really trying to solve? Like, you're actually creating a wedge and like a roadmap that people have to follow. Instead of asking a question of like, what are we creating today?
Mm.
So, yeah, you can solve the one problem, or you can create solutions that create a foundation that create a system that unintentionally solves hundreds of problems.
That's genius. I have a feeling you can CTO the shit out of some situations.
Well, and look, like I only know this a for just from my background of being an athlete and always needing something to fix, play the best match of your life. There's something wrong. Always looking at what areas were wrong, and even now, like my training, right, and how I was programmed, I have to catch myself, especially with my kids. Um, but also like the experiences I have of working with the executives. This is normal, right? You're working with the quote unquote best and brightest. You don't think they've been conditioned with the same things because it creates results. But what it does is creates limiting results because as long as there's a problem to solve, there's a job to do. But if that's the case, then there is a need for that in organizations. But who's actually working down the road? Who's actually focused on culture? Who's focusing on empowerment? And who's focusing on the macro of like, where do we actually want
Mm.
to go without needing to react so much?
So what I'm stuck on now is just this amazing concept of in that little exchange we had about what problem are you trying to solve. We live in this business world, this MBA world where there's a tool for everything, right? If there's a prioritization, you use the initiative prioritization tool or you use the Kanban for, and there's there leadership development feels like, wow, I've got a tool for conflict management, I've got a tool for this, and oh, we're going to apply this scrum this and we're going to do that. And and what I find so liberating just even in this moment is to say curiosity. You're not bringing, hey, I am bringing my tool, you need to fill in the blanks, and now we're going to have this mental model solve the thing for us. It's saying, I am curious about this whole thing that's playing out in front of me right now. I am curious like a child is curious about a red bouncy ball.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I have lots of tools in my garage. I don't have a good mindset for building and using those tools. Therefore, a hammer is really useless with me, right? Basically, I can hammer in some nails. That's all I got. I'm not building anything because I haven't taken that curiosity and developed a mindset around the possibility of that tool.
Mm. And two people can go into that same garage, and the two different mindsets will produce two completely different outcomes. That is genius. It's like I've been addicted to a TikTok lately where a master chef takes fast food. The son, it's the son's TikTok account. So his dad is a master chef or an Iron Chef or something. And then he'll buy like Popeyes or KFC or McDonald's or Pandas, and he'll bring it to his dad. And after his dad like vomits in his mouth, he asks his dad to reimagine the dish with the same ingredients. Like he takes literally what the son purchased, and the dad will redo it. And I'm having that image now of the amazing thing that curiosity is really the mindset with which you go into your garage or into your bag of tricks versus the it's a steel thing and it looks like I've got to try and put two things together, so I'm going to beat the crap out of it with this thing that's got like a like looks like a hammer. So that to me is actually a very interesting metaphor.
Yeah, and I think, again, looking at your example of the fast food, right, and the son bringing the dad and the Iron Chef, hey, can you duplicate this orange chicken and this fried rice? It's not that good, and make it like 5-star food. So, what is great about organizations and even healthy entrepreneurs and CTOs is the art of duplication. So, be careful what you duplicate, right? So, we can't duplicate the Iron Chef skill. At least I can't right now. Maybe you can. But we can duplicate his or her mindset. And I think that's the thing where we look at curiosity is, can we
Mm.
create an invitation to be curious? And can we create it with an invitation to duplicate and recreate across the organizations where it empowers people to be curious first and foremost, instead of focusing on getting it done or solving the problem, but actually honor the process of even questioning, like, why would we look at this issue? Like, what would it create for us? And then having some clay like molding period where you get to be curious before you actually do the thing. And I've seen this happen in organizations, and it actually turns out that they become more efficient because a lot of things they don't actually do. And they would have wasted a lot of time on that quote unquote problem.
Yeah, and that would and that further clarifies for me the habit of going. Oh, there's a habit that has the appearance of curiosity, that is solving problems the way you do it with the tools, versus the actual curiosity which opens up possibility and joins the scenario as a partner to create and to say, okay, what, and I think this is where powerful questions come in. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So what does, in your experience, even with coaching people, what does that curiosity actually look like inside of an organization? I know a lot of times we want to imitate, and I think this is what you talked about with the duplication, because I think this is why blog posts and books are so popular, right? Because Elon Musk built a rocket, and whatever he says is obviously the way in which I have to solve problems or I have to build business. I watched an interesting YouTube video on vacation about, he just rattles off 5 things about how you build a company, or more specifically a manufacturing process. And he rattles off 5 things that you should absolutely do, which is obviously learned from Tesla and all that. And I just found myself like, oh shit, I have to write this down. Like, I have to imitate this. I have to do this. And I think the brilliant point you're making is he's saying those 5 things from a mindset And so I can duplicate those 5 steps all I want, but if I miss out on the mindset, I'm not saying you might not fail, but it might not have the outcome that you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's spot on because you're going to get something from Elon, and those 5 things are probably super valuable. But what's even more valuable is to take from the mindset of like, where did he come up with those 5 things?
Mm,
Where is he looking? And how does that relate to what you want to do? Because it's going to be different, right? So, taking that and be like, okay, how does this work for Etienne? And I got it. And maybe it's four
yeah,
things for you. Maybe it's 6 things. Maybe they're close in relation. But to your point, it's really what are you driving for? Like what's in front of you? And how does it relate to your, higher level mission and purpose of what you're
yeah,
doing?
yeah. And I think why I kind of am lingering on this point is because of our industry's tendency to uh, model things, adopt best practice process, try and bring predictability into this creative world of software development, and really being frowned upon if you do something that just slightly veers outside of the, oh, has this been done before, who has done this before, what do you mean you're just making up your own process. These I feel like scientists don't like that world. They're like, well, what is the predefined SOP for doing something? And we fall into this trap, which I think, like you said, the practicality, that stuff all robs us from saying, hang on, why are we doing 2 week sprints? Like, how the whole, if you poll 1,000 CTOs, 999 are going to say, yeah, we do 2 week sprints. So, okay, I'm going to do 2 week sprints, but really, are you thinking about why you're doing it, and how does your company culture be its best self inside of these frameworks and processes that you're bringing in as CTO? And that's why I like this linger, because this really curiosity, apart from killing the cat, also invites us into this other way of thinking for the benefit of the organization.
Yeah, and look, like there's a reason why I remember curiosity killing the cat. And it speaks to what you just spoke to is everybody's afraid to not do those things. So fear will only take you so far. It's like putting diesel into a Ferrari. You're going to
Mm,
get to where you need to get to if it's short term. But once you go 20 miles in the diesel, the Ferrari is going to break down. And so curiosity to me, it's an empowering, you know, take the boundaries off, take the constraints off, and really explore where you can't do that from a fear based way.
yeah, and that phrase is meant to instill fear, right? Curiosity killed the cat. Like, don't be
Yep.
curious.
I'm pretty sure my parents told me that because
I was raised that way. Don't.
I was that kid who like, yeah, I'm gonna go touch that fire. Let me see. I don't really
Yeah,
believe.
from day one, it's like, don't be curious. Don't be curious. And again, the adult's fear, and you know, I don't know. Maybe experience um is a maybe you pour experience over the flames of curiosity to douse out that fire. Like, you know what? I've been there, I've done that, I've seen how this play ends. So, don't do it. And as a dad to my kids, and I'm sure you do this as well. It's like 101 times where you don't say something because you know how this plays out, but you realize they need to see that for themselves.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like, yes, we're not gonna like encourage our kids to put their hand in an actual fire, but a lot of other things I'll let it slide. Like, go and like skateboard without your pads. See what happens. Like they got to experience it. And I think there's a little bit difference when we talk about parenting versus empowering an organization, right? And I
Yeah.
think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at that. Managers are like the parents. Leaders are more like the support and the guide. But you really, as a leader, as a CTO, you don't have the time or the bandwidth to do all the doing. And yet, most CTOs and most highly executive people are taught to hold it within and not empower others for fear, right? Oh, well, if they can do it, then I'm not as marketable or I'm not going to have my job. On the contrary, if you empower your team, your organization, you will probably be the head of that company and other companies. So again, when you look at fear and curiosity, I think it's a little bit of both, right? We some healthy constraints of yeah, maybe some standard operating procedures are useful, but to your point, are 2 week sprints useful? Maybe, maybe not. But to your point, if 99% are doing it and aren't questioning it, that to me is the red flag.
Yeah, and I had a chat with a security expert recently, um, and he brought up this very same point where he talked about two-factor authentication, which is completely hackable and is not a solution to the login problem. But most CTOs are like, well, if Twitter can do it and Facebook's doing it, then they must be doing it, so I'm doing it. So the curiosity goes down. Well, how does it actually work? You know, it's how does multi-factor authentication? What does it actually mean when you implement that? And if you go to the wiki page and you read about that, you realize that it's not just sending a text or a code or it's really meant to be two completely different mediums of verification. And so if the one is on a web page and the other one is just a text, then you're still in the same quadrant. So you're not really doing what it was originally meant to be. And so in that rather convoluted example, the CTO is like, I'm curious, so how do I improve the security in my system? Or why is everyone using this particular method and how does that benefit us? And to start asking that. But like you said, I think the desire for efficiency, the urgency to get to market, the just the overflow of support issues and bugs and you know hiring and retaining talent. I mean, all that stuff says you don't have any time to be curious. You just have to let's move on. Let's have the other people or the kids be curious. You got real work to do.
Yeah, and I would definitely say you don't have any time to not be curious.
I love it. This is why I'm talking to you, man.
And look, like it's going to take someone like I don't know this for sure, but if you look at every great athlete, every great innovator, every great company, it took one jackass to question things. One annoying person who said, "Wait a sec, what are we doing here? When was the last time we asked why or what for do we do this stuff?" And that causes a ripple and at least examines the process. Now, maybe you still do it and then you have extra buy in of why you do it. But a lot of times it changes the game, right? Um, you mentioned Giannis and Kobe, right? Like they did things different. Kobe Bryant did things different. It changed the evolution of basketball, right? And changed the definition of an athlete. Talk about Kobe Bryant, and as far as like his legacy, a lot of his legacy is empowering the female game, the WNBA, and his love for systems. The great coach at UConn's women basketball, like that whole thing has transcended this and has transcended the WNBA and how players relate to that. So to me, it starts with the curiosity, right?
Mm,
And Kobe's legacy of getting into entertainment and production and producing films and podcasts that still live on today.
yeah.
If he just, to use a quote from Terrible Times of shutting up and dribbling, right? Which is basically, I don't have time to be curious. We just got to get things done. It's the same logic. um, then all these things would be for naught.
Mm.
So if we all questioned what we're doing in a healthy way and really took a look, it could create a lot of great ripple effects in CTOs, but and also in our world.
Yeah, we were, we just, you went way too far down the sporting analogies. But maybe I started it, but when it comes to American sports, I struggle. But we went camping this weekend, this week. Well, we just came back from a campground which was a stone's throw away from Kobe Bryant's Newport Beach estate, Crystal Cove, which is Laguna Beach area. Just so I had a lot of Kobe Bryant in my head this weekend. So yeah, maybe TikTok knew that I was close to his house.
I would imagine there's probably an algorithm for that. Yeah.
So the one thing I like to challenge myself with is this phrase, what if? And I'm now wondering if that is a nice gateway into just the curiosity or the beginner's mindset, which is, what if we didn't do 2 weeks, or what if this problem that's being brought to me wasn't really a problem, or what if the constraints were different? Is that, let's speak to a CTO who listens to this and says, oh my goodness, I am nowhere near what these guys are talking about. What, I think in my naivete, I usually coach people to say, well, just start asking what if questions and just start exploring that realm of possibility. But what are some other things that you've seen where people who understand that this is an issue in their leadership style, what's the next thing that they can do to start fostering that in the workplace?
It's a great question. I think what I've seen that has worked the best is when they get in a conversation who's not in the know, so is not a CTO or anything remote, and they start explaining and having a conversation about what they're working on. Because you're going to get what if questions like from a childlike standpoint, and it's going to help you when you report it back when you answer. It's going to have you questioning. One of the best things I like to do when I'm a coach, right? Because I'm going into a ecosystem that I don't have allegiance to. I bring autonomy, and I'm going to ask thought provoking questions on purpose. So when they say, when I say like, hey, well, what if you did it this way, or what's the reasoning behind having this, standard operating procedures, and it basically comes down to this is how we've done it. I'm like, so like horse and buggy or Tesla, right? Um, Snail mail or email? Like, do you have a rotary phone in the back? So, and of course, like I'm being kind of silly, but point is, it's like who's gonna stop doing things because this is the way we've done it, and who's actually gonna like say, well, this is what I see, not this is what has been like passed down from someone else. But when
Mm,
they start explaining it, like I'll encourage some of my executives to like have conversations with their spouse if they're not in the industry, or their kids,
interesting.
or even me, or even someone from another department, where they're just going to be curious because they don't know, they don't have the knowledge. And so it's a 5 minute conversation, but it gets, if it's someone in another department, that's great because it creates that connectivity, but also it creates a different mindset of maybe they wouldn't look there because they're in the weeds. So anywhere where you can have a conversation in a healthy way with someone not in the weeds, it's going to force people to have to explain like
Love that.
what has them do it that way.
So getting someone else's fresh perspective, which is not rooted in the biases or the stereotypes that would come from someone that might be closely So explaining something to your VP of engineering, you're preaching to the choir, right? So it's how about go and explain it to an executive admin or the financial controller, or and have them ask questions.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. And it creates the connectivity, right? Because again, sometimes we're in our world and it's not exactly conducive to innovation or curiosity in this
Yeah.
conversation, right?
So so the idea of the idea of challenging assumptions or questioning everything, for some reason when I hear the phrase, oh, be a company that questions everything, I hear fighting words. I don't hear productivity. I don't hear respect, or I I question everything. What comes up for you when you think about that in sort of organizational design?
Yeah, I think, my instinct is probably similar to yours, right? Like, are we then just like, randomly blurting out things and insulting whoever created some infrastructure and, going down that rabbit hole? I would say instead of questioning everything, I would say be intentional with what you're committed to. Because if we're intentional, then we're questioning our own self, not the company, our own self. And then we're bringing that in a healthy way to promote the commitment or the mission of the organization.
So it's less about question everything. It's more about, well, be intentional about what you want to co-create or what you want to solve, or and then from that the questions would seem more sincere and more, because it's not like, hey, my job is to listen to what you're saying and question everything because I'm gonna go on my lunch break in 10 minutes and I'm out. It's more like, listen, I am in this partnership with you. We're going to create something. And so my intention is to commit to an outcome. And in service to that, now my questions are more powerful.
Well, yeah, it's not surprising you don't like question everything because you didn't like what problem are you trying to solve. It's embedded in those questions that there's an issue.
Mm.
And that, like you said, it creates controversy, right? Puts that controversy wedge. And it also doesn't have responsibility. But if we shift that to bringing curiosity and intention to a larger commitment, all of a sudden, if the person's going on a lunch break, they're going to come back and be like, Etienne, let's partner on this. I'm not just going to be like, hey, I question this. How dare you say that lunches are only 30 minutes? I'm out. I'll be back in 31 minutes. Like, it doesn't really actually do anything to
Yeah, yeah.
larger.
I love that. I love fostering the culture or inserting the commitment or the intention question as a beginning. Is that a beginning to sort of, okay, I'm a CTO, I want to be more curious, I want to have a leadership style that evokes in, inquisitiveness or curiosity? Is that a good way for a CTO to start inserting that? Is to see it as, what is my intention, and then do they show up differently then, or what happens?
Yeah, I think really looking at why would I be intentionally curious, right? Because the nature they're not going to want to, right? Because again, through a limiting scope, it's going to like butt up against not enough time. Someone that's something that most people struggle with, right? Because we've been told there's not enough time. Our parents are like, hurry up, get to school. We don't have enough time for this. Grab your stuff, right? You got to finish your homework. There's not enough time. Blah 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 blah, right? All the things. So it's actually retraining, rewiring the system, right? It's almost like a software update. We've done it this way. We want to actually put in a new update, 1.1. And in 1.1, we're actually going to pause and be intentional of why would we behave this way? And in this one instance, why would I, be intentionally focused on what my commitment is and how can I be curious? And yeah, they're definitely going to show up different. because they're actually being different in their process.
What comes to mind for me, however, is questioning, even I think with a good intent, could come across as, why did you pick this database solution or this? I find that I have to tiptoe around, and I'm hearing my own words, by the way, but I'm finding that I have to tiptoe around challenging, like, hey, developers, you architected it this way. Why did you do it this way? Or can you explain to me? And I just find that in some organizations, specifically that I've been CTO of, that could sometimes come across as prescriptive or parental, or I feel like you got to tiptoe around that stuff and not come across as interrogatory.
Yeah, and that's a byproduct of the culture, right? I'm a big believer in, hey, let's get everyone on board with there's nothing we can't say to each other and clean up afterwards. And no need to be a jerk if you can package it in a way that's palpable. So I always like to say, so I'll use your example. I'll say, hey, I really love what you did here, here, and here with the design and the application. I'm curious though, like what had you look at designing this part this way? I would love to like know how to, I would love to hear your understanding so I can, connect those dots. Right? So
Mm.
you're questioning it, but you're actually acknowledging the things that they've done and the work they've taken on and the hours they put on that. But you want your understanding to match the level of expertise in which they designed it.
Yeah, the way in which you said it was so comforting and like so beautiful. So I'm wondering, what did I create as CTO when my people feel like I'm interrogating them? What did I not do? That
Hierarchy.
What's that?
Hierarchy.
I have established an accountability hierarchy in which I am the boss, and I have a right to interrogate them.
Yes. And you probably did it subconsciously and subtly. And there's obviously hierarchy in organizations. Nothing wrong with that. That's how a lot of organizations run. But when you're having those conversations, you've got to be intentional and mindful of that because that's gonna be how they're gonna perceive the conversation. So it's not like you've got to walk on eggshells or tiptoe, but you actually have to lay the foundation of the conversation from how you're approaching it and the words you say. But just knowing you, I can see how some people might be intimidated off the bat based on the hierarchy. And then if you're using language that reinforces that hierarchy.
Got it. I get accused a lot of being interrogatory.
I don't know what they see. And by they, your kids and your wife. No.
No, 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 no. I'm talking about employees.
Yeah.
Coach me, brother.
Well, it's partnership, man. It's
Yeah, it's
it,
partnership. And I think I don't want to glance over what you said earlier, which is creating a vibe where everything can be said and there's cleanup afterwards.
mhm.
Man, that sounds scary.
Sounds like a big playfield of curiosity. And the scary thing is you're imagining probably a place where you have to be with more and more unknown because it's going to come back your way too. It's not just you saying things to others; it's others saying things to you. But imagine a place, and this is kind of like your coaching group and your container that you're finishing up now, right? In theory, anything can be said, anything can be delivered in any way, really. But there's a mutual respect, and then there's a buy-in that we can always clean things up, and there's power in that.
Hmm.
We have this with our spouses in theory. Some have used it more than others, right? But if I'm a jerk later with my spouse and I say something stupid, like I don't think she's going to leave an hour after that, pack her bags and be gone. So she might be angry. I might have to have several conversations and own it. But I also know that our partnership is based on we can say anything to each other and we respect each other and we're not perfect. So we allow ourselves a little grace.
Yeah.
So imagine organizations where they allow themselves grace, sympathy, compassion, but also say what needs to be said and have a place where you can do that.
And so I think fear is the thing that, and I think that's the context that you've painted. Sort of fear is the thing that smothers curiosity, because I don't want to be with the unknown. So my fear is that you will be distracted, or you won't follow the SOPs, or the whole design will get thrown out the window, or we're not going to hit our dead. So smother, 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 so we can all stay productive. And what I'm hearing is a establishing a partnership that has a common desire, common outcome, a common creative force, in which everything can be said and explored and questioned, and within that partnership, within that intention, within that commitment, with a safety net guarantee that there will be cleanup if cleanup is required. Like, you got a little heated here, or I wasn't sure, were you accusing me of not doing my research? Or, Etienne, when you said that one thing, you clearly looked pissed. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm South African. I wave my hands and I speak loudly and I'm excited.
Well, and imagine the feedback that you would get that would support your growth, right? And look,
So true.
I get
So
it. Talk
true.
with your hands and excited, but you might be more mindful of like, okay, there's a time and a place for that, and you could even speak to that. You can even while you're doing it, you're like, oh, I'm really excited right now, and that's why I'm looking like I'm trafficking the airplane coming in. And I think that's the beauty of curiosity is it leads to knowledge, growth, development, and innovation. Most people want to learn and grow that I work with, right? And a lot of people are willing to sacrifice comfort for that.
Yeah.
And it's temporary uncomfort, right? Because once you're comfortable being in the uncomfortable, the world becomes a way bigger place.
Mm. So as a so to land the plane a little bit on this, what I feel like I'm learning some really amazing concepts, and I want to make sure I'm not taking this and running in the wrong direction. So one, question everything, the power of questions, challenging assumptions, being quote unquote curious, um, with left to itself and not rooted in partnership, can be a dangerous thing and can really be futile, or maybe it's just the luck of the draw, or the roll of the dice on how a powerful question had some random awesome moment. But in general, it sounds to me like being intentional, being committed, understanding your level of commitment in whatever partnership or whatever conversation or project you're in, inside of reinforcing the safety, the creative vibe, the outcome, the intention. Inside of that, curiosity is incredibly powerful, because everybody understands what field they're in and what playground they're on.
Yeah, it's amazing when you add partnership and personal responsibility, how the same thing that was divisive and risky becomes mandatory and empowering.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's why I can ideate with some people, but I can't ideate with others.
Yep.
It doesn't if I am to take this a little further, it's not that that person, there's something wrong with the creative juices in that person. It's that the partnership between me and that person is not well defined, established, trustworthy, and to me that's kind of a game changer right now. I feel like I need to go and get on a couch and draw up my gravity blanket and turn off the lights.
Yeah, and I think look, like being an ontological coach is super fancy for like how we show up, right? It's unnecessary to have that complicated word because everyone's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Okay, it's just how we show up. It's really simple." But that's part of the fun, right? Like all we're doing, like we said earlier, is we're taking the hammer and we're empowering the mindset and the process to utilize the hammer for what you want versus someone handing me a hammer and I'm just sitting there with a hammer, like I got nothing. So it's really cool based on first looking at yourself and then looking at your organization, but always starting here of like, hey, on my side of the street, how could I create that partnership with that person and then have that conversation go different?
Yeah, this and this leads me into a conversation we had before we before we started the recording, which so much of the CTO's responsibility as we look at the four S's, shielding, stretching, speeding, and salesing, um, in the stretch quadrant where we have to really just challenge the assumptions that we're making about who we're hiring, why we're hiring them, what am I responsible for, what am I not responsible for, how is my role evolving as CTO, how does the organization need to respond to the market, how are we filling up our hiring funnel and inspiring people to join our organization. So much of that to me, this is where it starts, is your partnership with the organization, partnership with your C-suite. To me, it's a completely different conversation now if I think about going into the C-suite and presenting a organizational restructuring or creating space within your organization for data scientists and AI or whatever as a function of partnership, establishing the partnership in the C-suite as a team,
Mm-hmm.
being curious then versus going in and almost and this, I know this happens for a fact, is almost adversarially going in and in spite of the C-suite fighting for those hires or creating, oh no, we can't, it's almost like this little, like you said, the hierarchy of, well, I report to the CEO or the board and I need to go and fight for this budget. And oftentimes, from what I'm realizing now, is if you just go and not fight for it, but first establish intention and commitment and partnership, man, I feel like within that realm that it's like a whole playground everyone can run onto. It's incredible.
Yeah, you override the bumpy bridge, right? You're taking out the like fighting, and then the CEO's probably thinking, well, I've got a block, right? So one person's fighting, the other person's blocking, and we wonder why it's a real rough patch. But in all the successful coaching I've done with executives, CTOs, and CEOs, whenever there's that conversation that would usually be adversarial, and you build that partnership and trust first off, it's two things. One, that person hears you differently, completely through a different lens, and is able to receive the information 100% differently. Second, the person, so in this example, the CTO speaking to a board or the CEO, they're actually speaking to their needs as well. It's not a I need this for the company. It's actually a we conversation. And in some of those asks or in some of those requests are interest from the other side. And the CTO's job is actually just bring that to light so that we then decide what's the most indicative and important things now for this budget that has all of our needs met.
Yeah, and I think I love that we conversation because inevitably the CTO will be on the receiving end of, well, I'm curious about questions because, if your budget, used to be, 2 million and now it's 5 million because the CTO foresees things coming down the pike, as I mentioned, or is recognizing a shift in the market, which everyone has experienced recently with the pandemic. Development costs have tripled. It's harder to find people. No one's locked in by geographical constraints anymore. Everyone's working from home for any company from anywhere. And so, if as CTO in the we conversation, you are presenting these things, you will be on the receiving end of, well, why, or please explain, or what does this title even mean, or are you sure we need, and so I can imagine how that would feel like an interrogation big time.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of CTOs not only hate those situations, and I'm sure most people do, but a lot of them actively avoid those conversations because it sucks for introverts. It sucks for supportive people. It sucks for very smart people because they think automatically the rest of the C-suite is just stupid or dumb or they don't get it. So I want to go find a new position. Meanwhile, there's this opportunity to establish this partnership, which is a totally non-intuitive way to go about solving this particular conundrum.
Yeah, 100%. And I've coached a lot of people making those presentations. And again, from a foundation of partnership, those conversations become a lot more enjoyable. And also in our speaking, are we proactively, right? Like when you're talking about stretching, are we proactively planning and speaking to the questions and objections people are going to have before they ask them? Right? Like, what does this title mean? Why would we need this? Right? Those questions coming back are feedback to, hey, like there's an opportunity here to say this
Mm,
fluidly from the expert in the room prior
yes.
to having somebody ask a question that probably makes them feel kind of stupid. And
Yeah.
then the CTO has got to deal with the stupid person in the room.
It's crazy.
But the CTO is responsible for creating that dynamic.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering how many opportunities are lost to optimize an organization, empower people, and create a whole different vibe just because you're afraid or just because of that dumbass conversation that takes place in the C suite where neither team is empowered to be safe, to be with each other. This stuff to me is so. This is the transformational juice right here. This is the expertise and the domain expertise and the experience. I mean, that's one thing. Yeah, I've built autonomous vehicles and I know how to crunch the data to turn left or right. Great. But can you partner with the C-suite? Can you partner? Can you be curious? Provide a safe, curious environment for your management team, for their people. It's that stuff is game changing.
And the irony is both parties are uncomfortable. And the funny thing is, both will have to do and be something different to create that, right?
Absolutely.
I always like
Absolutely.
to say that the trust and the relationship begins with cargo shorts and t-shirts, not suit and ties or button downs, right? I don't know if they still make cargo shorts. My wife's probably like, if she ever hears this, like, did he just mention cargo
I
shorts?
don't even know what that
Oh,
is.
yeah, sorry. So, point is, it's the one with all the pockets. Come on. Uh,
Oh my goodness. Yes,
yeah,
those things are nasty.
I'm bringing them back. I'm just you heard it here first. But point is, like in unassuming clothing, where you're at a barbecue, families together, or a baseball game, where you can just be humans. You're not CTO and CEOs. You're actually humans, and you connect in that human level, and where you can actually get to know them and where they're coming from, even as simple as like grilling something or reaction to a game or whatever the thing is. You start to get to know them, and they get to
Yeah,
know
I
you,
love that.
and the
I love it.
walls come down, and all of a sudden you start to build the foundation.
I had an example of that this weekend where my kids and I went into a McDonald's for breakfast. It was too late for breakfast, so we had lunch. And my wife hates McDonald's, so she stayed in the RV and she was like, I'll see you guys when you're done. And so we went in and we had a pretty large order because the four of us were pretty hungry, and so and when the fries came out, the fries were stale and they were clearly, out of all the boxes we had, none of them, they clearly were scraping from the bottom of the barrel. And but the great opportunity was my children were able to discern that because they know what good fries taste like by now,
Mhm.
you know, just like they know what the good iPad apps are. But anyways, little trained brains. But so clearly there was a situation where we had to get up and go give the fries back and ask for new fries. And I went and I did that, and we got a whole new bag of fries and then some, and it was fresh and it was awesome. But then I had a very interesting conversation with my kids, in which I was able to tell them that the person that I asked for new fries was a person that likes good fries and as a human understands what it's like to not eat good fries. So I wasn't asking the McDonald's Corporation or the Golden Arches to, please, can you reimburse this peasant with, I went to another human and I just spoke to them as a person. And so I literally had this conversation with them where I could reinforce to them that when they give the feedback, when we talk about the customer is always right in that context, it really just means that you can go to an employee of that company and speak to them as a person, and you're not battling, the brand or this corporate juggernaut. You're not asking McDonald's for fresh fries. You're asking Juan Carlos, who happened to be his name, for some fresh fries, and he had no problem with doing it. He was like, "Yeah," and so that to me, with the cargo shorts and the CEO across from the table and the CMO and the VP of revenue or whatever, these are in the end they're just humans, which cliche as it sounds is an incredibly powerful way to relate and build partnership.
100%. And if we tie that into fear and curiosity, all of those humans, Juan Carlos included, have those things going on. They have fear, and they
So
have
true.
curiosity, and usually the fear will get in the way of people's curiosity, and they will just get the job done. But I have a feeling if you're a CTO, you don't want your staff just getting the job done. You don't want to just get the job done. Juan Carlos doesn't just want to get the job done. That's why he said, "Yeah, I'll give you new fries." Of course,
Yeah, yeah, I
because
love that.
most people want to support people, want to help people, want to empower people, and do a little bit better than average. So, in order to do that, you've got to unlock what curiosity could open up. And it could open up some uncomfortable conversations and some things being questioned that frankly probably should be questioned. That's kind of how we have the world transforming and growing and evolving. If we didn't question things, we'd still be, again, horse and carriage. Someone said there's got to be a better way.
So when that discomfort arises, what, again, speaking to the CTO who's sort of trying out these concepts, maybe they've done the work to establish some partnership, reinforce the partnership. Their intention is clear. But boy, when that thing gets said, the discomfort levels go through the roof. What would you say to that CTO?
Acknowledge it, like speak to it, because you can feel it, you can sense it. So, but by acknowledging it, you're actually putting on a loudspeaker that you're doing it anyway. And you obviously, once you say it, now you kind of have to say it. So you can feel the discomfort and then bail, right? You can bail stage left or right, right? But once you say it, now you got to say the thing. And I think that's being vulnerable,
Wow.
and that's extending the partnership to other limits. Where,
And that is and that is exactly why we avoid the crap out of it, is because
of course,
the vulnerability is insane. And even worse than avoiding it is then blurting something out that is authoritative, mean. Meanwhile, you're just a child inside, just weeping because you feel so uncomfortable, but then the words that come out are loud and horrible, and it does damage.
yeah. So that goes to the personal responsibility part, right? Like you actually have a responsibility if you see something, say something. But you also have a responsibility to deliver it in the way you want to. Otherwise, you're going to beat yourself up. And it's not actually going to get the job done, right? If you lash out and say something that is not received in the way you intended, that thing's probably not happening now because they're going to, that's going to dissolve the partnership.
Mm,
They're going to
mm.
be reactive. And all of a sudden, you've got the thing that you didn't want to say the thing for in the first place. You've created the thing you wanted to avoid.
So see something, say something in this context means I see that I see that there's discomfort on the call, or I'm sensing everyone when, and then you're saying at that point is to name it, to say I see, it seems like, or I feel like, that kind of say something.
Yeah, and you could always preface it like, "Hey, this could just be me," right? So you're not like assuming that everyone feels the same way. But I sense that there's like a little bit of awkwardness or nervousness or discomfort in the space, and I want to acknowledge that I'm uncomfortable because I'm bringing this thing which I normally wouldn't in service of partnership, growth, and curiosity, as opposed to bottling it up and then lashing out a week from now in a passive aggressive email.
Well, the challenge is you sit with those things. It's so hard because even with that intention and even with that commitment, we have so few tools, or it's just so hard to sit with something.
Well, even in the construct of it's so hard, now you're reinforcing that. Consider it's not hard, it's just different. If you and I were to go play tennis left handed, it would be different. Our brains would call that hard. No, it's just different. We know how to swing a racket with our other hand.
Hmm.
We're just doing something different.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
because
yeah,
what
we're going to
what's hard
rationalize
for me.
that. We're going to
What's that?
rationalize. We're going to rationalize that we're going to suck in the beginning by calling it hard to sustain our ego.
Hmm. So where do we what do we leave our people with on this? Curiosity. I think the intention, the partnership, the curiosity, the safety to be curious, and now the things will be different because you'll hear someone say something, it will evoke an emotion. Someone else might challenge that. The introverts might say things in awkward ways, or extroverts might be completely out of line with some observations. And in that partnership and in that intention, all this differentness starts happening.
Yeah,
Sounds terrifying.
it sounds like someone should film that portion and play it on like a highlight reel later. Um, but I think that they should start, like, all the people that are listening, that this like sounds like something they would want to try, is like, why would they start with themselves? What is this in service of, personally, professionally, and also like do this everywhere. Do this in your relationships. If you're married, have this with your spouse. If you have kids, you have family, cousins, brothers, parents. Do this, friends, right? Do it on a smaller gradient too, right? Where like less can go quote unquote wrong. And practice. Like there's this thing where like people are afraid to
Mm.
practice, right? Like Kobe Bryant sucked when he came in the league, to use another sports metaphor, at shooting. It's terrible, terrible. And he practiced. He was really good at sucking for a while, and then he got better. So I think the first step is, hey, why would I do this? That this crazy coach and Etienne were talking about. Why would I subscribe to that? And then once they've created kind of a why there, be willing to practice and be willing to improve and create that foundation for their teams and their organizations. And again, like we've been talking about throughout, is put down the I don't have time to be curious and start picking up I don't have time not to be curious.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, the notion that curiosity can be practiced is seems quite foreign, but yes. And like you mentioned, starting with established partnerships at home, maybe practicing it inside of partnerships where you don't have to question the essence of the partnership, you just practice curiosity. Does the Are there a couple just things that people can ask themselves, like you mentioned, like why this, or but some why questions? Is there a go-to phrase or a go-to? It's like someone who's first day at the gym, just do 10 push-ups. Like, what would the equivalent be of day one practicing curiosity?
I would start by noticing curiosity in general. So that would include notice where you're not curious, like brushing our teeth, and then noticing where you are inviting curiosity, like maybe recreating a workout routine or a morning routine. But just start noticing, right? Don't try to fix or create necessarily, just notice, and you'll naturally start evolving and practicing curiosity.
Noticing. Very cool. Wow. Any closing remarks? This was really very, very refreshing.
Well, I just had a blast. So I want to thank you for allowing me to come on to this and talk about curiosity, because I think this is huge for not just CTOs, but people in general. And I think the only thing I would say to everyone who's listening is um, this is a privilege that we get to practice curiosity. It's not something we have to do, and to practice it from a childlike state and have some
Mm,
fun.
love it. Okay, Jeff. Well, hopefully not the last time our CTO see you in the CTO studio, and I'll see you soon again.
Sounds good. Thanks, brother.
Cheers.